So how long have you been living here?
I've been living in Tucson for about 36 years.
And you live around here?
I live about 15 minutes
Okay,
from here.
15 minutes. So what do you think happened here? As you being a Tucson resident, what's your gut telling you?
My gut is telling me that it's the brother-in-law, or the son-in-law.
Son-in-law. Why?
Just too many things. You know, he had pictures. There was a picture or two that came out, and you haven't seen him since. You haven't heard from him.
Radio silent.
The other people have, the family, Savannah and, her brother and sister have done things. He hasn't been involved in any of it. And I don't know if he's trying to stay away from the limelight or what it is, but I can tell you this, it's very suspicious to me.
There is new activity in the search for Nancy Guthrie and possibly someone being detained in the case. Investigators have blocked off a street in her neighborhood tonight. They're bringing in forensics and even a SWAT tactical vehicle. The mother of TV host Savannah Guthrie was kidnapped from her Tucson, Arizona home nearly 2 weeks ago. Eyewitness News reporter Michelle Fisher live in our newsroom now with the breaking details. Michelle?
The room was quiet. Too quiet. Cameras clicked like tiny hammers in the dark. Bright lights pointed at one man sitting at a long wooden table. Tomaso Cion did not look up at first. He sat still. His hands were folded. His lawyer sat beside him. For weeks, he had said nothing. He hired an attorney. He refused interviews. He ignored reporters. He would not answer police questions. He invoked the fifth. And now, on this morning, he was finally going to speak. A reporter cleared her throat. "Mr. Cion," she said softly, "do you have anything to say about Nancy Guthrie's disappearance?" Tomaso lifted his head slowly. His face looked tired. His eyes were red. He leaned closer to the microphone. "Yes," he said. The room froze. "I have something to say." More cameras flashed. Pens scratched across notebooks. Even the air felt heavy. "For weeks," he continued, "people have believed I hurt Nancy." He paused. His lawyer placed a hand on his arm. Tomaso swallowed hard. "But the truth," he said, his voice shaking slightly, "is more complicated than anyone thinks." Reporters leaned forward. One whisper moved across the room. He took a deep breath. "I was there that night," Tomaso said. Gasps filled the room. "I did go back to the house." A louder gasp. "But what happened inside wasn't what anyone expected. And that is where everything changed." February 1st, 2026. Tucson, Arizona. The winter sun rose over quiet streets lined with desert trees. Inside a neat home in a peaceful neighborhood lived 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie. By that evening, she would be gone. Nancy was not just anyone. She was a widow, a mother of 5, and a grandmother. She once worked as a university administrator. She volunteered at church. She loved baking cookies for her grandchildren. She had a pacemaker to help her heart beat. She was medically fragile, but she was strong in spirit. On February 1st, something terrible happened. Nancy disappeared from her own home. There were strange signs. Her pacemaker had been removed. Security cameras were destroyed. There was a small blood trail. There was no forced entry. The doors were not broken. The windows were not smashed. It looked like whoever was inside was allowed inside. Police asked one important question. Who was the last person to see Nancy alive? The answer shocked many people. It was her son-in-law, Tomaso Cion. He had power of attorney over Nancy's affairs. That meant he helped manage her finances and important decisions. Just days before she disappeared, the garage door had been closed in a way that blocked one of the security cameras. That small detail would later feel very big. When police asked Tomaso questions, he did something that made people uneasy. He hired a lawyer. He stayed silent. He did not explain. Weeks passed, The FBI joined the case. Search warrants were signed. Investigators searched phones, computers, and bank records. A masked figure was caught on a blurry camera nearby. Ransom notes appeared, but police later said those were likely scams. Savannah Guthrie, Nancy's daughter, made public pleas. She begged for her mother to come home. A $100,000 reward was offered. Still, Tomaso said nothing. Until today. Back in the press room, Tomaso cleared his throat. "I never meant for any of this to happen," he said quietly. The words hung in the air. What did he mean? The case had already been confusing, but now his statement opened a new door. He admitted he went back to Nancy's house that night. Why? Police had long suspected he knew more than he shared, but now he was confirming something important. He was there. He closed his eyes briefly. "There was an argument," he said. A wave of murmurs swept through the room. An argument? Over what? Nancy was 84 years old. What could have caused such tension? His lawyer leaned forward. "My client will not answer questions," the lawyer said firmly. "He will read a prepared statement." Tomaso nodded. He unfolded a sheet of paper. His hands trembled slightly. Nancy planned to make changes. He read, important changes. Changes to what? Her will? Her finances? Her power of attorney? Reporters scribbled quickly. "I went back to talk," he continued. "That is all." His voice cracked for just a second. "I did not go there to hurt her. But something happened inside that house. Something that led to a removed pacemaker, destroyed cameras, and blood on the floor." He looked up again. "I panicked," he said softly. The room fell silent again. What did he panic about? What did he see? What did he do? For weeks, investigators had talked about digital data from Nancy's pacemaker. Pacemakers record heart rhythms. They record time. They tell doctors when something changes. 3 weeks ago, according to sources, investigators confronted Tomaso with information they had not shared publicly. Something about the timeline. It was something about when the pacemaker stopped working. Something about movement inside the house. But they never told the public what it was. Until now. Tomaso lowered his paper. "I found her on the floor," he said. A sharp intake of breath came from the crowd. "She was hurt." "How? From what?" He shook his head slightly. "I tried to help her." Tears formed in his eyes. "I didn't know what to do." But that was not the end. "I made mistakes," he admitted. Big mistakes. He admitted he damaged the cameras. He admitted he removed the pacemaker device. He admitted he did not call 911 right away. Gasps again. But then he said something that stopped everyone cold. "She wasn't alone." Silence. The room seemed to stop breathing. What did that mean? If Nancy wasn't alone, who else was there? And was there another person inside the house that night? Was the masked figure from earlier footage connected? Was Tomaso protecting someone? Or blaming someone? He looked down at the table. "I can't say more right now," he said. His lawyer stood up. "That is all for today." Reporters shouted questions. Who else was there? Is Nancy alive? Where is her body? But Tomaso did not answer. He walked out of the room. And just like that, the silence that lasted weeks was broken, but replaced with something even more unsettling. Because now, the case was no longer just about suspicion. It was about admission. He had confirmed he returned. He had confirmed there was an argument. He had confirmed he made decisions that night. And he had confirmed that Nancy was not alone. Outside the building, News vans lined the street. Phones buzzed across the country. Savannah Guthrie was reportedly watching the statement live. How would she react? For weeks, she had defended the search for answers. For weeks, she had avoided directly accusing her own brother-in-law. Now, she had new information. But was it enough? Back inside the investigation, detectives began reviewing old evidence in a new light. The closed garage door blocking the camera, the lack of forced entry, the dog not barking that night, the timeline from Uber records, the pacemaker's final data signal, the small blood trail. If Tomaso truly found Nancy hurt, then how did she get hurt? If someone else was inside, why haven't they come forward? And why wait weeks to speak? As the sun set over Tucson that evening, the case felt heavier than ever. Because now there were words. And words change things, but they do not always bring clarity. Some experts said this could lead to charges, obstruction of justice, tampering with evidence, maybe even something worse. But others warned, there is still no body, there is still no full confession, and there are still too many unanswered questions. Where is Nancy? Was she alive when the pacemaker was removed? Who else was inside that house? And what exactly happened between the argument and the panic? The night of February 1st is still a puzzle, but now one piece has moved. And when pieces move, the picture changes. The question is, does it reveal the truth or hide something deeper? And what investigators say they discovered about Nancy's pacemaker data? Maybe the most important detail of all. And what investigators say they discovered about Nancy's pacemaker data may be the most important detail of all. Because pacemakers do more than help a heartbeat. They record time. They record rhythm. They record when something goes wrong. 3 weeks before Tomaso spoke, investigators quietly received a full data report from Nancy's cardiologist. It showed something strange. At 8:42 p.m., Nancy's heart rhythm changed suddenly. Not slowly, not naturally, suddenly. At 8:47 p.m., there was movement detected. At 8:52 p.m., the pacemaker recorded what doctors call acute distress. And at 9:03 p.m., the signal stopped. Not because the battery died, not because the device failed, but because it had been removed. That timeline did not match the story Tomaso had first told police weeks earlier. Back then, through his lawyer, he had claimed he left Nancy's house early that evening and did not return. But phone data showed his device near the home after 8:30 p.m. Now, with his statement, he admitted he went back. That one change shifted everything. Detectives gathered in a small conference room inside the Tucson Police Department. On the wall was a board filled with photos. Nancy smiling at church. Nancy holding a grandchild. Nancy in her garden. Beside those were printed screenshots, security footage, a blurry, masked figure walking near the side gate, a dark SUV parked down the street, the garage door closed low enough to block a camera angle. Detective Morales pointed at the timeline on the board. 8:42 p.m. Heart distress begins, she said. 8:47 p.m. Movement. 9:03 p.m. Device removed. She turned to the team. That's 11 minutes, she said quietly. 11 minutes from distress to silence. The room was still. Another detective spoke. If he found her already injured, how did the pacemaker stay active during that time? No one answered. Because the data suggested Nancy was alive, at least for part of that window, which meant whatever happened, happened quickly and intentionally. Meanwhile, outside the police station, the media storm grew louder. Savannah Guthrie released a short written statement. "My mother deserves the full truth," it read. "We will continue to cooperate with authorities." She did not mention Tomaso by name, but her message was clear. Inside the family, things were breaking apart. Annie, Tomaso's wife and Nancy's daughter, had stood by her husband during the early weeks. She told friends she believed in him. She said he would never hurt her mother. But after his public statement, everything changed. Because he admitted destroying cameras. He admitted removing the pacemaker. He admitted panicking instead of calling for help. Those were not small things. Those were actions. And actions have consequences. Neighbors began speaking to reporters. One woman said she heard raised voices that night. Another said she saw headlights late in the evening. A man across the street remembered Nancy's small dog barking around 8:45 p.m. But here is the strange part. The dog stopped barking suddenly, as if someone familiar told it to be quiet. That detail chilled investigators. Dogs often bark at strangers. They do not always bark at family. Police re-examined the security system, and the garage door had been lowered just enough days earlier to block the driveway camera. Not fully closed, just enough to hide a clear view. When asked about it weeks before, Tomaso had said it was to keep the sun out. Now that detail felt different, because if cameras were later destroyed, someone already knew where they were. Someone already thought about visibility. And that brings us back to what Tomaso said. She wasn't alone. Detectives searched through phone records again. At 8:31 p.m., Tomaso received a short call, 14 seconds long. The number was not saved in his phone. At 8:36 p.m., he made a call back. 9 seconds. Then silence. Who was on the other end? Investigators traced the number. It belonged to a prepaid phone, purchased with cash, 3 days before February 1st. And that phone pinged a tower less than a mile from Nancy's house that night. And then it went dark. The masked figure caught on nearby footage appeared around 9:15 p.m., walking quickly, head down, hood up. Was that person connected to the prepaid phone, or was it just coincidence? The more evidence detectives uncovered, the more complicated the picture became. Back at home, Annie reportedly confronted Tomaso after his statement. Sources close to the family said she asked him one question. Who else was there? He did not answer clearly. And that silence inside the family may have been louder than the one he kept publicly. Legal experts began discussing possible charges: tampering with evidence, obstruction of justice, failure to report a death. But without a body, things became harder. Was Nancy dead that night? Or was she taken somewhere? And if she was taken, by whom? Police quietly searched desert land outside Tucson. They reviewed traffic cameras along highways leading toward the border. Weeks earlier, Tomaso had been briefly detained near the Arizona border during a routine stop. At the time, it seemed unrelated. Now it felt different. Why was he near the border days after Nancy vanished? He claimed it was business, but investigators were not fully convinced. Financial records added another layer. Nancy had reportedly planned to update her will. A meeting with her attorney had been scheduled for February 3rd, 2 days after she disappeared. The new will draft would have reduced Tomaso's financial authority. That fact alone gave motive in the eyes of many observers. But motive is not proof, and proof must be strong, especially in a case watched by the entire country. Then came another quiet development. Forensic teams re-examined the blood trail inside the house. It was small, not large enough for a violent struggle, but it moved in a pattern from the hallway toward the garage, not toward the front door, not toward the backyard, toward the garage. The same garage with the lowered door. The same garage where camera angles were blocked. Investigators tested the concrete floor. Tiny fibers were found near the drain. Dark fibers, from what appeared to be a moving blanket, the kind used to wrap furniture or people. If Nancy was moved, she may have been carried, wrapped, hidden. But by one person? Or two? Remember Tomaso's words? She wasn't alone. If he was telling the truth, then someone else knows exactly what happened. And that someone has not spoken. Yet. The grand jury was quietly convened. Witnesses were called. Digital experts testified about the pacemaker data. Financial analysts discussed account activity. Family members gave statements. Every piece of evidence slowly formed a timeline. But timelines do not explain emotion. What happened inside that house during those 11 minutes? Was it an accident? A push? A fall? An argument that turned physical? Or something planned long before? Investigators believe the dinner that night may hold answers. Phone records show food was ordered, 2 meals, delivered at 7:12 p.m. So Nancy was alive and eating dinner. Who was sitting across from her? What was said? What changed the mood? What made her heart race at 8:42 p.m.? And what caused someone to remove a medical device instead of calling for help? As pressure mounted, prosecutors began preparing possible charges. But they were careful. Because once charges are filed, there is no turning back. And if there truly was another person involved, that person could still be out there, watching, waiting, and maybe afraid. The public now had part of the story, but not all of it. Tomaso broke his silence, but he did not give full answers. Instead, he opened a new door. A door that led back to February 1st. Back to dinner. Back to the argument. Back to the moment Nancy's heart changed rhythm at 8:42 p.m. To understand what really happened, we have to go back inside that house, back to that night, and piece together, minute by minute, what unfolded between an 84-year-old grandmother and the people she trusted most. Back to that night, February 1st, 2026. The sun had already set over Tucson. The sky was dark blue, fading into black. Inside Nancy Guthrie's home, the lights in the kitchen were warm and soft. Nancy moved slowly, but she moved with care. At 84 years old, she still liked to set her table neatly. A small plate, a folded napkin, a glass of water. Her pacemaker rested quietly under her skin, helping her heart beat in steady rhythm. At 7:12 p.m., the doorbell rang. Food delivery? 2 meals. That detail matters. 2, not 1. Nancy did not order 2 dinners for herself. Phone records show the order came from Tomaso's account. He had been there earlier that evening. Neighbors saw his car in the driveway around 6:30 p.m. Since police later confirmed his phone pinged a tower close to the house at that time. So dinner was not random. Dinner was planned. What we know is this: they ate together. The delivery driver later told investigators the man who answered the door looked tense. He said he heard a woman's voice in the background. Not yelling, just talking. At 7:40 p.m., Nancy's home phone made a short outgoing call to her lawyer's office. It went to voicemail. The message was not fully recorded, but experts were able to recover a few words. Important change. Not comfortable. Tomorrow. The message cut off. Was she talking about her will? About power of attorney? About Tomaso? We cannot say for sure, but that voicemail is part of the puzzle. Around 8:20 p.m., neighbors reported hearing raised voices. Not screaming, but louder than normal. Nancy was known to be calm, soft-spoken, so raised voices were unusual. At 8:31 p.m., Tomaso received that short 14-second call from the prepaid phone. Investigators still do not know what was said. But right after that call, things begin to change. At 8:42 p.m., Nancy's pacemaker recorded sudden distress. Doctors explained what that means in simple words. Her heart began beating very fast, then uneven, like someone frightened, or in pain. 5 minutes later, at 8:47 p.m., the device recorded physical movement. Not small movement, not walking slowly, but sharp movement, as if her body shifted quickly. Then, at 8:52 p.m., the pacemaker recorded something even more serious. Doctors call it acute cardiac event. In simple terms, her heart was in trouble. Very big trouble. What happened in those 10 minutes? Did she fall? Was she pushed? Did she collapse during an argument? We now go inside the house as investigators believe events may have unfolded. The dining table was cleared. One plate was half-eaten. One was mostly finished. A chair was slightly tipped. Nothing smashed. Nothing broken. But the air may have been tense. Sources close to the investigation believe Nancy told Tomaso she planned to change her legal documents. She may have told him she wanted to remove his financial control. That could have created stress. Money and control can change people. At 8:40 p.m., according to phone data, Tomaso's phone moved from the kitchen area toward the hallway. 2 minutes later, 8:42, Nancy's heart spiked. Detectives believe that may have been the moment everything shifted. One theory suggests Nancy stood up. Perhaps she said she wanted him to leave. Perhaps she said she would call someone. Perhaps she said she did not trust him anymore. If voices were already raised, emotions may have been high. What happens when two people argue in a small hallway? Space becomes tight. Voices become louder. Movements become sharper. If someone reached out, if someone grabbed an arm, if someone pushed too hard, an 84-year-old body is fragile. Very fragile. A fall for a young person might mean bruises. For someone Nancy's age, it could mean broken bones. Or worse. The blood trail later found was small, which suggests not a violent attack, but possibly a head injury, a cut from hitting something. The hallway table had a sharp wooden corner. Investigators measured its height. It matched the height of Nancy's injury pattern. That is not proof, but it is consistent. At 8:47 p.m., the pacemaker recorded movement. Perhaps she fell. Perhaps he tried to lift her. Perhaps she was still conscious. Then, at 8:52 p.m., her heart went into distress. This is the moment Tomaso described as panic. He claims he found her on the floor, but the timeline shows he was already inside the home during the argument. So did he find her? Or was he standing there when she fell? That difference matters. Instead of calling 911 at 8:52 p.m., there was no emergency call, no ambulance request, no hospital visit. Instead, investigators believe something else happened. At 8:55 p.m., Tomaso's phone went silent. No calls, no texts. But phone location data shows it moved toward the garage area. At 9:03 p.m., Artiki Daunin Alifirasi, Nancy's pacemaker signal ended. Removed. Doctors have said removing a pacemaker requires force. It is not simple. It is not gentle. It is not something done to help. Why remove it? Some experts believe it could be to hide the exact time of death. Pacemakers record everything. Once removed, the recording stops. If someone wanted to create confusion about timing, removing the device would do that. But doing so takes thought. Even in panic, that is a big decision. So was it panic? Or was it fear of something else? The blood trail moved toward the garage. Not outside, not toward help, toward the garage. The garage where cameras were blocked. The garage where later, small cleaning marks were found. The garage where a faint tire pattern was lifted from the concrete. At 9:15 p.m., that masked figure appears on nearby footage, walking quickly, head down. Was that person leaving, arriving, or just walking by? Investigators cannot yet confirm, but remember the prepaid phone. It pinged near the house around 8:40 p.m. and again near 9:10 p.m. Then it went dark forever. Inside the house, detectives believe Nancy may have still been alive at 8:52 p.m. But by 9:03 p.m., the pacemaker stopped. We do not know if she was alive when it was removed. That question still hangs in the air. What we do know is this: no one called for help. Instead, cameras were later destroyed. Evidence was cleaned, and Nancy was gone. If Tomaso acted alone, he would have had to move her body. If someone else was there, they may have helped. And this brings us back to his statement. She wasn't alone. If another person entered the home that night, who were they? Why were they there? Were they invited? Or did they come because of that 14-second phone call? Detectives now believe that short call may have been a signal, a warning, or a plan. And that means what happened may not have been sudden. It may have been building for days. Nancy had a meeting scheduled with her attorney. Changes were coming. Control was shifting. And for some people, losing control feels like losing everything. But this is still only part of the night, because after 9:15 p.m., there are more movements, more details, more gaps in the story. And what happened between 9:15 p.m. and midnight may be the most important part of all. And what happened between 9:15 p.m. and midnight may be the most important part of all. At 9:18 p.m., Tomaso's phone turned back on. It had been inactive for nearly 20 minutes, not powered off completely, but no activity, no light, no screen use. Then suddenly, it moved again. From the garage area to the kitchen, from the kitchen to the backyard door, and back again. Investigators believe this was a period of movement, cleaning, thinking, deciding. At 9:26 p.m., a text message was sent from Tomaso's phone. It was not long. Handled, just one word. Sent to a number not saved in his contacts. The same prepaid phone. That phone never responded. But cell tower data shows it was still within 2 miles of the house at that time. That word, handled, has become one of the most important pieces of this case. Handled what? An argument? An accident? A body? Detectives later asked Tomaso about that message. His answer was short. I don't remember. But phone data remembers. At 9:41 p.m., a vehicle was seen pulling slowly out of Nancy's driveway. Security footage from a house 3 doors down captured headlights. The video is grainy, but experts believe it matches the shape of Tomaso's SUV. The vehicle stopped briefly near the mailbox, then continued down the street. No one saw Nancy inside. No one saw anyone else inside. But something about the way the car moved felt careful. Not rushed, not panicked. Careful. At 10:07 p.m., Tomaso's phone pinged a tower on the east side of Tucson, farther than a short drive. That location was near a stretch of open desert land. A place with few lights, few homes, few cameras. Our investigators searched that area weeks later. They found tire impressions near a dirt path. They found traces of disturbed soil. But they did not find Nancy. Not yet. By 11:12 p.m., Tomaso's phone was back near his home. He made no emergency calls. He made no calls to family. The next morning, at 7:15 a.m., he sent a text to Annie. "Your mom isn't answering her phone." That text is now under heavy review because phone data shows he was inside Nancy's house late the night before. If he already knew something was wrong, why send that message like he was just noticing? At 8:03 a.m., he called 911. His voice sounded calm. Too calm, some say. He told dispatch that Nancy was missing. He mentioned the broken cameras. He mentioned blood. But he did not mention the argument. He did not mention returning to the house. He did not mention removing the pacemaker. All of that came later, only after weeks of silence. Only after the pacemaker data was revealed. Only after pressure grew. Back in the present day, prosecutors are building their timeline carefully. They are not rushing, because every minute matters. The 11 minutes from distress to device removal, the 20 minutes of phone silence, the word handled, the desert tower ping. Each detail is like a puzzle piece, and puzzle pieces do not lie. They just wait to be placed correctly. Meanwhile, Savannah's public plea played again on television. She stood outside the family home weeks earlier, holding back tears. "If anyone knows anything," she said, "please come forward." Now the question is different. Does someone already know everything? And if there was another person that night, they may be carrying the same weight of silence. Investigators have quietly interviewed several individuals connected to Tomaso's business. One former employee said he noticed unusual cash withdrawals days before February 1st. Another said Tomaso seemed stressed, nervous, talking about changes coming. There was also a report that Nancy had recently questioned certain financial transactions, small ones at first, then larger ones. Was that part of the argument? Was the dinner meant to smooth things over? Or to confront? One more detail adds pressure. At 9:34 p.m., during that gap before the SUV left the driveway, Nancy's home Wi-Fi recorded a login to the security system. The account password was entered correctly. Cameras were manually disabled. Not smashed first, disabled. And then later, physically damaged. That means whoever did it knew the password. And Nancy was not known to share passwords freely. Tomaso had access. But did anyone else? Remember the prepaid phone? Remember the masked figure? Remember the text? Handled. The grand jury continues to hear testimony. Forensic experts, digital analysts, family members. The legal question now becomes serious. Was Nancy's death, if she died that night, the result of an accident followed by panic? Or was it something planned that simply went wrong? Because those are very different crimes. An accidental fall during an argument could lead to manslaughter charges, but staging a scene, removing medical equipment, destroying cameras, moving a body. That becomes something else, much more serious. The family is now divided. Some believe Tomaso's tears were real. Others believe they were timed. And he has reportedly moved out temporarily. Trust, once broken, is hard to repair. And there is still one question that echoes louder than all others. Where is Nancy? Without her body, the case remains open. Search teams are preparing to return to the desert site where the tower ping was recorded. Cadaver dogs will be used again. Ground-penetrating radar may scan the soil. Because if Nancy was taken there that night, the Earth may still remember. And if someone else was in that house, that person may be watching the news right now, knowing the timeline is closing in, knowing the evidence is stacking up, knowing that silence does not last forever. Tomaso broke his silence. But did he tell the whole truth? Or only the part he had to? And because investigators believe there is still one missing piece, one action, one movement between 9:15 p.m. and 9:41 p.m. that has not yet been fully explained. And that missing piece may decide everything. And that missing piece may decide everything. Because between 9:15 p.m. and 9:41 p.m., something very important happened inside that house. Investigators now believe that was the moment a decision was made. Not about an argument, not about calling for help, but about what story would be told the next day. Let's look closely. At 9:17 p.m., the garage door sensor shows it was opened halfway. Not fully, just halfway. Then closed again. 3 minutes later, it opened fully. Then closed. Why open and close it like that? Detectives believe someone may have been testing the camera angle, checking what could be seen. But remember, the driveway camera had already been blocked days before. So whoever did this knew where the blind spots were. At 9:22 p.m., motion was detected inside the garage. The security system recorded that motion. Even though video was later destroyed, that motion lasted 46 seconds. 46 seconds is long enough to move something heavy, or someone heavy. Nancy was small, but even a small adult is not easy to lift alone, especially if you are nervous, especially if you are shaking, especially if you are trying not to make noise. Investigators later found a faint scrape mark near the garage step, as if something had been dragged or carefully lowered. At 9:24 p.m., Tomaso's phone connected briefly to Bluetooth inside the SUV. The engine was not fully started, but the system powered on. That means the car door likely opened. Maybe someone was placed inside. Maybe something was placed inside. At 9:26 p.m., the text "handled" was sent. That word keeps coming back. Handled, not helped, not accident. Handled. It sounds final. It sounds like something was finished. Then, at 9:29 p.m., Nancy's house Wi-Fi shows another login to the security panel. This time the system was placed into maintenance mode. That mode stops alerts from being sent to the monitoring company. It prevents automatic emergency notifications. That action requires knowledge. It requires a password. And it requires calm hands, because panic does not usually lead to careful system settings. By 9:34 p.m., the backyard light was turned off manually. Neighbors later told police that Nancy always left that light on at night. Always. It was her habit, her safety routine. That night, it went dark. At 9:41 p.m., the SUV slowly pulled away. Not fast, not speeding, just steady. A careful exit, as if trying not to draw attention. Now we shift to the east side of Tucson. At 10:07 p.m., The SUV's movement placed it near a desert access road, the same area investigators later searched. At 10:12 p.m., the phone stopped moving for 9 minutes. 9 minutes parked in darkness. What can happen in 9 minutes? A short walk? A shallow dig? A quick concealment? Or a meeting with someone else? Because remember, the prepaid phone also pinged near that same desert area around 10:05 p.m. 2 phones, 2 signals, 1 location. That is not easy to ignore. Detectives now believe it is possible that Tomaso did not act alone. But they are careful, because believing is not proving, and proving requires more. Back at the house the next morning, first responders walked into something strange. The blood was small. The cameras were damaged. But the house was not chaotic. It was tidy. Too tidy. As if someone had taken time after something terrible. When police first asked Tomaso about the cameras, he said maybe burglars damaged them. But there were no signs of forced entry, no broken windows, no pried locks. Nancy's small dog was found inside, calm, not shaking, not hiding. If a stranger attacked Nancy, the dog likely would have barked loudly. But neighbors said the barking stopped quickly that night, as if someone the dog knew had quieted it. That detail keeps circling back. Familiarity. Trust. Nancy opened the door that night willingly. She ate dinner. She spoke. She argued. And something changed. Now, as the grand jury reviews all of this, they are asking one key question. When did the intent change? Was the dinner meant to solve a problem? Or was it meant to confront one? Because if someone knew Nancy planned to change her will, if someone knew power and money were about to shift, that knowledge can create fear, and fear can lead to terrible choices. But there is still one more strange detail. At 8:58 p.m., during the time Nancy's heart was failing, a short voice recording was accidentally captured on her home smart speaker. It was only 4 seconds long. The device had been triggered by a sound. For weeks, the audio was unclear, but forensic experts cleaned it. And what they heard made the room go quiet. A woman's voice saying, "Please." Then a loud thud, and then silence. No full sentence. Just that one word, "Please." Was she asking for help? For him to stop? For someone else? Investigators played that audio in the grand jury room. Some jurors lowered their heads. Because that single word carries weight, it makes the timeline feel human. It makes it real. Tomaso has not publicly addressed the audio. His lawyer says the sound could mean anything, but the timing matches the pacemaker spike. And timing matters. Prosecutors are now deciding if they have enough for charges. They know this case is high profile. They know mistakes cannot be made. They know Nancy deserves justice. But they also know a courtroom requires certainty. And right now, they are close. Very close. Because the desert search is not finished. Because the prepaid phone purchaser has not been identified. Because the financial audit of Nancy's accounts is still underway. And because one more witness may be ready to speak. A person who has been silent. A person who was close to Tomaso. A person who may know what handled truly meant. If that person talks, everything could shift again. Because silence only lasts so long. And in this case, silence is cracking. But the truth is still unfolding. And what investigators are about to reveal about the desert site may change the direction of this case completely. And what investigators are about to reveal about the desert site may change the direction of this case completely. 3 days after Tomaso's public statement, search teams returned to the desert. This time, they came prepared. Cadaver dogs, drones, ground-penetrating radar. It's a crime scene tape stretched across dry sand and low desert brush. The air was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes your ears ring. Detective Morales stood near the dirt path where the SUV's location had paused for 9 minutes. She looked down at the ground. "Right here," she said softly. The dogs were brought forward. One of them stopped suddenly. Its body stiffened, then it sat. That is how trained dogs signal something important. The handler looked at the detective. "This dog is alerting," he said. A second dog was brought in. It walked in a small circle. Then it too sat. Same spot. 2 independent alerts. The ground looked normal at first, but when investigators brushed away the top layer of sand, they noticed the soil underneath was slightly darker, softer, as if it had been disturbed. And a shovel was brought forward. The digging began slowly, carefully, every inch documented, every movement recorded. About 2 feet down, they found something. Not a body. Not yet, but fabric. Dark blue fabric. Thick, like a moving blanket. The kind investigators had already found fibers from in Nancy's garage. The blanket was partially buried, folded, as if used. But there were no remains wrapped inside. Just the blanket. Detective Morales closed her eyes briefly. This was something. Not everything, but something. Because it linked the garage fibers to this desert site. And it meant at least one thing had been transported here. But where was Nancy? If she had been brought here, why leave only the blanket? Unless something interrupted the plan, or someone else took over. Our investigators widened the search area. Drones scanned nearby washes and dry creek beds. By late afternoon, another discovery was made. A small metallic object was found about 30 yards from the blanket site. It was partially buried, covered in dust. Forensic technicians carefully lifted it. It was damaged, bent, but still recognizable. A pacemaker casing. Serial numbers matched Nancy's medical device. The room back at headquarters went silent when that was confirmed. Because that meant her pacemaker was removed at the house, transported, and discarded in the desert. But still no body. That raised a new possibility. Maybe Nancy was not buried there. Maybe she was moved again. Because the 9-minute stop at 10:07 p.m. might not have been the final stop. It might have been a meeting point. At the same time. So phone records showed something else. At 10:15 p.m., just after the 9-minute pause, Tomaso's phone briefly connected to another device through Bluetooth. Not his SUV. Another device. Connection lasted 18 seconds, then ended. Investigators now believe another vehicle may have been present. If that is true, then Nancy may have been transferred from one vehicle to another, which means at least one more person was involved. Back in the grand jury room, this new evidence was presented. The blanket, the pacemaker, the Bluetooth link, and the audio clip of Nancy saying, "Please." One juror reportedly whispered, "This wasn't panic." Because panic does not usually involve desert trips. Panic does not usually involve transferring objects between vehicles. Panic does not usually involve prepaid phones. And the pressure on Tomaso increased immediately. Reporters gathered outside his home. Annie had not been seen publicly in days. Savannah issued another statement. "We are grateful for the continued efforts of law enforcement. We will not stop searching for our mother." The tone had changed. There was less hope in her words, more resolve. Meanwhile, investigators located the store where the prepaid phone had been purchased. Security footage showed a person wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses. Cash payment. No ID. But height and build were noted. The person appeared slightly taller than Tomaso. Slim. Quick in movement. Was that the masked figure seen near the house? Possibly. Police are now reviewing traffic cameras near the desert site that night. Because if two vehicles met there, one may have been captured entering or leaving nearby roads. Every minute is being re-examined. Every frame slowed down. Every light pattern studied. Back inside the timeline of February 1st, detectives are also revisiting the dinner. Forensic testing on the plates revealed something unexpected. Nancy's meal showed no signs of poison, but Tomaso's plate had barely been touched. Why order 2 meals and barely eat yours? Was he too upset? Or was dinner simply a cover? If Nancy planned to change her will on February 3rd, that means February 1st was likely not random. It was 2 days before everything changed legally, 2 days before financial control shifted. And now, with the desert evidence, prosecutors believe they may be moving closer to formal charges. But there is still one missing link. Who was the second vehicle? Who was the person connected to the prepaid phone? And who heard the text message, "handled," and did not reply? Investigators are now preparing to question Tomaso again. This time, with stronger evidence. With the pacemaker found in the desert, with the blanket, with the Bluetooth record, and with the audio clip. Because once confronted with physical proof, stories can change. And when stories change, truth often slips out. The question now is, will he continue to say it was panic? Or will he finally explain who else was there that night? Because someone else was there. The data shows it. The desert suggests it. And silence is running out. But even with all of this, Nancy has not been found. And until she is found, this case remains painfully open. The next interrogation may decide everything. And what happened inside that room when detectives showed Tomaso the pacemaker casing is something we have to look at very carefully. And what happened inside that room when detectives showed Tomaso the pacemaker casing is something we have to look at very carefully. The interrogation room was small. Gray walls, 1 metal table, 2 chairs on one side, 1 chair on the other, a camera in the corner recording everything. Tomaso sat with his lawyer beside him. Detective Morales walked in slowly. She placed a clear evidence bag on the table. Inside was the damaged pacemaker casing. Bent, scratched. Dust still caught in its edges. She did not speak at first. She just slid the bag forward. Tomaso looked down. His face changed. For the first time since this case began, his calm mask slipped. His jaw tightened. His breathing grew heavier. Detective Morales spoke softly. "We found this in the desert," she said. Silence. "No panic drives someone to a desert road," she continued. "No panic buries a blanket. No panic connects to another vehicle." Tomaso stared at the table. His lawyer whispered something to him. He nodded once. Then he looked up. "I didn't plan for her to die," he said quietly. Those words hung in the air. Not, "she didn't die." Not, "I didn't hurt her." But, "I didn't plan for her to die." Detective Morales leaned forward. "Who was with you?" she asked. Long pause. The ticking of the wall clock sounded loud. Tomaso closed his eyes. "There was someone else," he said. His lawyer tried to interrupt, but Tomaso kept speaking. "I called him after the argument," he admitted. That 14-second phone call, and the prepaid phone, the masked figure. It was not random. "He came to help me," Tomaso said. "Help you with what?" the detective asked. "With the situation." That word again. Careful words, but words that revealed more than before. Tomaso explained that after Nancy fell during the argument, he panicked. He claimed she hit her head. He claimed she was still breathing for a short time. He claimed he did not know what to do. Instead of calling 911, he called someone he trusted, a business associate, someone who owed him a favor. That person arrived later. That may explain the second vehicle. That may explain the Bluetooth connection. That may explain the blanket. The associate, according to Tomaso, suggested staging the scene, destroying cameras, removing the pacemaker. "Make it look like a break-in," he allegedly said. And so they moved her. Together. But here is the part that still chills investigators. Tomaso claimed Nancy stopped breathing in the garage. Not in the hallway, not in the kitchen, in the garage. Which means she may have still been alive when she was moved, when she was carried, when decisions were made. That detail is now under intense legal review. Because if she was alive and no one called for help, that changes everything. Detectives pressed harder. "Where is she now?" they asked. Tomaso's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know," he said. According to his statement, the associate insisted on taking over after the desert stop. Tomaso claimed he left the site and drove home. He said the other man took Nancy's body to another location. He refused to give the name publicly, but investigators now have it. An arrest warrant was issued for obstruction of justice, evidence tampering, and manslaughter charges against Tomaso Cion. The second suspect is under active investigation. Search teams are expanding their efforts. This case is no longer just about silence. It is about action, about choices made in fear, about loyalty twisted into crime. Nancy Guthrie was not just a headline. She was an 84-year-old mother, a grandmother, a woman who trusted her family. Her final moments, if the timeline is correct, were filled with confusion and fear. A single word caught on audio: "Please." That word reminds us that this is not gossip. This is not drama. This is a life. As of now, a Nancy has not been found. The search continues. The case is moving toward prosecution, and the truth is still unfolding in court. Justice is not finished. But silence has finally cracked. If you have any information related to Nancy Guthrie's disappearance, please contact the Tucson Police Department or submit an anonymous tip. Cases like this remind us how important it is to protect elderly loved ones, to watch for financial exploitation, to speak up when something feels wrong. Nancy deserves answers. Her family deserves closure, and we will continue to follow every development in this case. If you believe in justice, share this story, raise awareness, and subscribe so we can keep shining light where darkness tries to hide. Because we don't stop until the truth is fully revealed.